So I'm going to introduce our last two speakers to talk about participatory plant breeding, to talk about this sort of care project that we are gathered to focus on. Solveig is a postdoctoral research fellow in the Center of Sustainable Food Systems at UBC, at UBC Farm, I should say, in Vancouver. And there, Solveig supports the Canadian Organic Vegetable Improvement Foundation. You guys just call it NOV.
Yes.
Yeah. By leading a participatory carrot breeding project in a decentralized Canada-wide vegetable variety trials. Her work explores the practice, science, social dynamics, and seed sovereignty potentials of participatory planting. In addition, we also have Rebecca Ivanov, who's also part of this talk. Rebecca is the seed program manager at the Ecological Farmers Association of Ontario, and Rebecca supports farmers to learn about regional seed production and to implement participatory variety trials and plant breeding projects as part of the BATA initiative on Canadian seed security, as well as the EFAO's farmer-led research program.
Right. Thanks, everybody. So we've heard about the benefits of urban agriculture, the benefits of having agriculture happen on campus, and I'm here to add a piece about how participatory plant breeding can be a way to identify and develop crop varieties that work well in these urban systems. So varieties represent biodiversity within a species. So who's ever looked at a seed catalog or bought seed online or bought seed from a rack at a store? So in those cases, you don't find just one kind of carrot or one kind of lettuce or one kind of sunflower. You find many. You find varieties. So that's what we're talking about. And all those varieties are created through plant breeding. So I'm going to start by defining what plant breeding is, and then illustrate that process with the carrot breeding project that brought you one of the varieties that you're going to taste in a moment. Our project wasn't designed for urban ag per se, but the methods could be very easily adapted to breed for raised beds, for green roofs, for any kind of system that you're working with. They could be adapted fruitfully or rootfully. Couldn't miss that. So a few different definitions of plant breeding have been proposed. A couple of them are there. They both mention the genetic improvement of plants. One mentions this combination of art and science, which really resonates with me because plant breeding is a creative process, not just a technical process. Plant breeding builds on the changes of domestication. So this carrot image here has a wild carrot on the left-hand side, that side. And then all of these are variations on domesticated carrots. So once the single large taproot was formed, the biennial habit, the increased sugar, the variety of pigments, plant breeding molds those traits into different forms that are appealing for different cultures, different preparation methods, different growing environments. So another way to think about plant breeding crystallized for me kind of early in my graduate school journey. I like to think about everything we make, from clothing to furniture to food, is this confluence of what we value, what we think is beautiful or useful, and what we've got to work with. And so our food also reflects this interplay between values and resources. And these two images reflect some common and some divergent values. Does anybody want to just popcorn into the room? Like, what values do you see reflected in either of those images?
On the one on the left, you talk about like uniformity and how there's a particular image we have of every vegetable and or fruit, and people want that, not like
totally.
But plants are things that grow, so they're obviously not going to always look the same.
Right, but in the commodity vegetable trade, uniformity is really important, really valued. Anyone want to throw another one out, which you see in common or different? You see values of color, of freshness, of variety, a value for a supply year-round on this side, and a value of seasonality here in the CSA box. So all the vegetable varieties you see here and that you see there were created with some values in mind and for specific systems. Because values emerge from cultural context, I'm going to share really briefly about my path to plant breeding and some of the values and questions and identities I bring to this work. So I grew up in Southwest Wisconsin in the United States, where my Norwegian and German ancestors came and settled on Ho-Chunk, Osetee, and Kickapoo land in the mid 1800s. I was an outdoor kid and still am. I went to college, caught the farming bug, and then spent 8 seasons as a co-owner of a farm in Northeast Iowa, also in the United States. For me, farming tied together environmental care with working outside, business and marketing, and caring for my community. So it was this way to put ethics into action and ethics into edible form, into tangible form. After selling that farm, I found the seed world. I became an organic product manager for a seed company in Western New York. And there I got to observe systematically these differences among varieties and got really interested in like, what happened here? What made these varieties so different and in ways that were, I knew as a farmer, were important to how the variety performed, how much yield I got, how much food I was able to give to my CSA members. So eventually figured out that that was something that I could understand too. As I got to know a few organic plant breeders who were able to put things in terms I could understand, which hopefully I may be able to do for you today. And did a doctorate in community-engaged plant breeding at University of Wisconsin, working on beets. So you'll see some beet-related photos. From there, I came to the UBC farm, which is on unceded ancestral and traditional Musqueam land. And before I dig into the how-to of plant breeding, which will be the bulk of this talk, I just need to acknowledge that seed has been a tool of colonization. Seed is a way of literally making space on the land for the people who eat that food and for the agricultural systems that produce it. So as a settler in this place, in so-called North America, it's really important for me to hold an awareness, curiosity, and critical questioning what I'm making space for on the land, and who's in control of that land. So yeah, definitely want to invite more reflection on those topics. What I've been making space for lately is the Canopy Project. Why improve vegetables specifically for organic farms in Canada? So Canadian veg growers rely mostly on hybrid seed, or mostly on seed produced by companies outside of Canada, many multinational companies, many hybrid varieties, which are very high in quality, but which require farmers to buy seed every year. While there are some great seed companies supplying seed into Canada, as we all have experienced with the pandemic, supply shortages can happen for any number of reasons. And so for that reason, farmers here need the skills and the community to source or grow seed that meets their needs. So seed security. Organic farms also have specific needs. So they're systematically different from conventional farms in that they don't modify the environment with inputs to become homogeneous. That said, there's a lot of variation among organic farms. There's more variation among organic farms than among conventional farms for those reasons. So there's a need to identify and develop vegetable varieties specifically for the needs of Canadian organic farms. One way we identify varieties is through variety trials. That is where participants get a set of varieties, like the sister rutabagas from last year's trial, grow them according to their normal practices, and rate them on an app, the same app we'll be using for our variety tasting. For farmers, this is a low-risk way to see new varieties and to find ones that might work on their farm. It's also a way to learn from other farmers about their cultural practices, what they're doing to raise these varieties in different contexts, and to build that network. Because like knowing who to ask about things when issues come up is super valuable for people running their own farms. Participatory plant breeding is a way we develop varieties for Canadian or for organic agriculture. We use a participatory approach for a few reasons. First, because participatory plant breeding facilitates selection in environments that diverge from mainstream breeding environments. Farmers and breeders carry out selection in the target environment, which is organic ag in various locations, rather than doing indirect selection in a conventional environment, which can result in greater gain from response to selection for traits like flavor, yield, climatic adaptation, these complex traits that are controlled by many genes. So it's effective. It also allows both farmers and consumers to participate in the process. So you're building a market while you're breeding, right? It's also consistent with these principles in the organic community of engaging multiple stakeholders and exchanging information freely. Also fun, which is one of the reasons I do it. I really like working with farmers and gaining insights and working with chefs and having them give input on what's cool, what's going to grab people's attention. And so you build this community. You build the community as you're learning how to feed it, right? It's a generative, active process. So whether or not you use this participatory approach, there are 6 steps to developing any plant variety on which there are basically infinite variations. So I'm going to lay these out and then illustrate them with the carrot project. So this first one is the what do you value piece. What is the value in this variety for yield performance, for marketability, for culinary use? What variation is present in the species for the traits you're interested in? And are you able to access that legally and ethically? Then these next 3 steps describe how you work with that material. So you create a population that varies for the traits you're interested in, select from that population, and then test the progeny and do that several times. And then last, you release your cultivar, which is a process of communicating with who's going to use it, the farmers, seed companies, gardeners, about what you've developed. Okay, in the world of carrots, so why carrots? Carrots are an important market crop for many of the growers we work with, especially for storage over winter. We chose this nonce type, so market class in carrot is determined by shape, and this one right here, this kind of cigar-shaped one, is a nonce type that uniform thickness makes them very good for storing. I need to take a drink of water. Okay. And this is a crop as well in which many growers use hybrids. There are some very reliable hybrids that have been out there for decades that farmers are really reliant on. And they are concerned about what would happen if those varieties are taken off the market by those companies. These are some of the traits that the farmers agreed were of value in this kind of carrot. It's also important to realize that even if you know what you want to get, not everything, the traits you see in a crop, so the phenotype, which is what we'll be tasting as sweetness, texture, what we'll see as color, those are the phenotypes. They're partially controlled by genes and partially controlled by the environment. And the environment then is comprised of the climate, the weather, and the agricultural system. The next step is identifying germplasm. So wild carrot originated in roughly Afghanistan, and currently wild relatives are spread all around, especially the Mediterranean basin. And here in North America is Queen Anne's lace, that is a wild carrot. Orange carrots with biennial growing cycles of the type that we are sampling were domesticated in Northern Europe. So to access germplasm, we go to several sources. We go to public sources like the Germplasm Resources Information Network from GRIN, to access varieties that are highly uniform and have been trialed. So some of these are commercial varieties that we are comparing our variety against. So those can be found at seed companies. To access varieties that have been shared and curated less formally among farmers and gardeners, we can go to informal sources like seed swaps or the ecological seed finders. There are a lot of different places where seeds are. What we actually did was work with people who are already working on developing carrots for organic agriculture. So this is the USDA carrot breeding program at University of Wisconsin, and then the Organic Seed Alliance, located out in Washington in the US. So they've been working for about 8 years now on the Carrot Improvement for Organic Ag project. So in 2018, some folks went out to their fields and selected some lines that looked promising, came up to Canada and trialed them there, and selected a few parents. So these are 3 of the 4 parents of the variety. And then we created variability. So who's grown carrots before? Okay. Have your carrots ever gone to seed? No, that's intentional because they're biennial, right? So in nature, the carrot would experience a winter outside. They experience that fertilization period and then send up their floral shoot. We give them a winter in the refrigerator and then plant them in greenhouse pots like that. Let them go to flower and then put a cage around them and release flies inside to create or to make seed over the winter that then can be planted outside the next year. So we can annualize that biennial cycle to speed up the process of plant breeding. So put all 4 parents, roots of all 4 parents in the cage, let them open pollinate, and then we selected. So for 2 years we did mass selection, which is where we basically spread the whole population out and pick the individuals that have combinations of traits. So especially in those early generations, it's important to find individuals that are not just a self-pollinating parent, right? So mass selection is great, but when you select an individual, you only have information about that one parent, right? You don't know what it's related to. You don't know what genes are hiding in the background. So to get at that, we did family selections last year. So we planted out 54 families and first selected among them. So the families that overall looked best, we selected 15. And then we selected within them to come out with 90 roots that looked great on the outside, looked great on the inside, meaning we had an orange core instead of a yellow core. We can have the orange versus yellow core discussion later. It's all aesthetic, not related to flavor. And we tasted them all. It's really important to taste at every step of the development process, because once you lose variation for good flavor, you are going to have a pretty carrot that tastes like something you don't want to eat. Okay, so then we evaluate the progeny. If all of the population this year looked like the 91 roots we selected last year, we'd be done. We've got a new variety. But there is this phenomenon that say we're selecting for the degree of taper in the root. So I've selected the 91 roots that are the least tapered, which are represented by that far end of the tail, right? The mean taper in the next generation will be less than in the one before, but it won't be as cigar shaped as the ones that I selected. And that's the response to selection depends on the degree to which the trait's under genetic control. What matters to farmers is how the final cultivar looks on their farms. And one good way to do that is to do a variety trial, which is what we did this year. So about 40 growers across Canada did this trial. Yes. Okay. Including University of Toronto. We're evaluating it using the Seedling app, which we'll also use for our tasting evaluation. And we get information like this. So we'll have the live results of the tasting after we do it. We'll get bar charts that we can sort by trait to see how the varieties compare. We get these pie charts at the end of the tasting. You'll get, would you grow this again? Would you eat this again? Yes or no. Often those pie charts are the most telling thing in terms of whether a variety is a real, thank you, or yes, it's good. And then we also do statistical analysis, which obviously we won't do today, but that's another way to put that variation in context of the variability in the whole population and the population size. And the final step is to release the cultivar, which is a good time for the bad news about this year's carrot population. In the greenhouse last winter, we had an issue with thrips, which is a little insect with sucking mouth parts that unfortunately got into our cages and ate either a lot of pollen or a lot of young seeds. So we have very low germination on our orange population, which is a giant bummer. There are a few ways we can go about reconstituting that population, and I can talk about those later if you like. But unfortunately for this population, we're not ready to proceed to the next step, but we're still going to get some valuable information about how commercial cultivars that are out there right now are performing on farms across Canada, and hopefully that will be useful for people. The next steps are seed production and marketing, which all of these things happy to answer questions about it. Thinking about agrobiodiversity, the breeding process creates that agrobiodiversity or creates that genetically different plant that can then appear on the landscape, and the step of marketing shapes who has access to it and where on the landscape it actually will appear functionally. And then the world of intellectual property is large, but considerations are protecting plant breeders' rights, or the ability of plant breeders to make money on the thing they've developed and therefore be able to keep developing plants, protecting farmers' rights to save seed, or their ability to save seed for their own production and not have to go back to a seed company every year, dealing with the high degree of concentration in the seed industry, and trying to maintain a high quality gene pool outside of those intellectual property enclosures that is accessible to people at large who want to live with seed and save their own seed and carry it from generation to generation. So, seeds to carry from this part of the talk. Plant breeding is a combination of art and science that brings together values and resources in really infinite variations on these 6 basic steps that I laid out. These are embedded in systems, they're adapted to farm systems, they're traded in various systems that determine where they end up. Okay, and then Rebecca's going to tell you about what's happening in Ontario right now.
Sylvie has talked a lot about the science of plant breeding, and I really appreciate it. I really appreciate all the talks today because I haven't been in a space like this for a long time. I'm usually standing out in a field or behind a computer talking with farmers, chatting with farmers. And so part of my role is to work with farmers to implement research in their areas of production at the Ecological Farmers Association of Ontario. Like Solveig, I always like to say where I come from. I grew up on the Oak Ridges Moraine, running around with the Jefferson salamanders, looking down and seeing if it was a smog day or not in Toronto. But I now live in Guelph on the Speed River, which is the homelands of the Chinootan and the Mississaugas of the Credit. And I've always loved this space between art and science. It's been a place where I find it brings me so much joy, and it brings out the curiosity in me. I went to the University of Guelph in the first year. They had an arts and science degree, and tried to bring these silos together, and no one understood why I couldn't have exams on the exact same time and the exact same day. So combining the sense of place and history of a place and history of myself has always been important, and then tying that with the culture that's embedded in agriculture. There's cabbage here growing. You're like, yeah, what the heck does that look like? That's the second year of cabbage going to seed. Planted out. It's a April green cabbage that stores really well. So it's still green in April. I imagine my German ancestors, my mom was born in Germany, eating a lot of cabbage, and there's a lot of cabbage recipes in the family. But there's also a lot of wonderful stories of folks from my Bulgarian Macedonian side, and that's a tomato that was gifted to me through family friends. And so I think about when I plant these things in the ground, I'm thinking about all of these, the sense of place, the sense of story that are inherent in seeds. I went on to do work with farmers in Honduras who were working in local research committees, improving the agriculture in their marginal environments. And so learning from them about how possible it was for growers of plants and to select and change, and then go out and tell that story about the plants and share with each other that knowledge was so inspiring. But I wanted to know what people in my own backyard was doing about that. And to do that, I went and started figuring out what was happening on farms. Got the farming bug, as Solveig said, and ended up spending 7 years at an ecological farm, where I also got to incorporate seed production into the practices. And so for 6 years of the farmer-led research program, I was a participant. 3 of the years I was a participant, and now I get to participate on the other side. So I'm at EFAO. We're supporting building resilient ecological farms. And one of the things I really love is that's happening in all sorts of different environments. So some of the environments that we've already been hearing about, but also, north of Thunder Bay or, outside of Guelph. So there's lots of different environments that we're working with. It's an organization that's been around for 40 years and has really been farmer-led. This exchange of knowledge has always been really important. I think our research program really helps support these goals. So why farmer-led research? Well, I really think, and research that in surveys and such like things that we've been doing over the years, it really shows that it empowers farmer knowledge generation and transfer. It strengthens local capacity to innovate, and it really ignites this culture of curiosity, which we've seen grow as more and more people get excited about what they could do on their farms. And it does support on-farm resilience in the face of climate change, because farmers we're all experiencing climate change, and farmers really want to be a part of the solution, is what we are finding. And, it supports livelihood benefits, both the personal and the business of farming at the business level, but also the community level. There are currently 10 member-led research priorities, and as you see, one of them is seed selection, production, and breeding. And I wanted to point out that we do try to help farmers make research more possible on their farm, because farmers are very busy people. So to make research more feasible, we do offer a small stipend, help cover research expenses. But I think equally as important, we offer staff support, and we offer a community to share questions and curiosities and just chat with. So over the last 6 years, I know I just love throwing pictures on here, but EFAO has been able to support farmers who create new diversity, so that plant breeding work that Sylvain has been talking about. So this is me about 5 years ago. I was part of a seed breeding club we formed of different seed breeders, and we bred a new variety of pepper, and that came out because of we felt we needed a blocky red pepper that did well in organic systems, that tasted delicious, and we couldn't find that in an open pollinated variety. There are some hybrids out there, but even the hybrids that did well in our systems were a bit more pointy than what people wanted. They were looking for these square things. So we partnered with a graduate student and a professor at a land-grant university in the United States, informally while chatting on a step at a conference. And Rachel Hultegren here in the green had done some trials to find a variety trials to see what red peppers met the traits of blockiness and early ripening. And so she helped create a cross for us, and we, as a little farmer seed breeding club, received seed. It's like this gift, right? And then we felt responsible to someone. Anyways, so then we planted it out and selected over the many years, and it has been released. It is still a bit of a variable population, but we kind of liked, as we grew to know this plant, we kind of liked the idea of not something that was super uniform. We think that there's more genetics in there that might be able to adapt to your place and also to a change in climate. But we have released it, and we did pledge it under the Open Source Seed Initiative pledge, meaning that it can be, you can go off and breed with that pepper. That's great. Anyways, but we've at farmer-led research, we've worked with so many folks doing, creating new diversity. So creating new sweet potatoes that actually ripen in Ottawa. Okay, let's try and do that. Or but also what variety of grain amaranth does well here? Or what fava bean does really well on a rooftop in Toronto. So there's always this process of both, finding out what variety does well in the different environments, but also creating. And I love this. I can chat a lot about these things, so we might have to do that over carrots. I think, as folks who are working in urban systems, you have curiosities that might be different than farmers in rural environments. And so I think this ability to do research that's really based on your curiosities and coming to us and saying, how can we create a protocol on how to do this, we'll be able to support the systems that we've been thinking about. Just wanted to say that, this is a cycle. Right now, if you have questions, you can start thinking about what questions you might want to answer in the coming year, and then we will have we'll have office hours and times to chat with you about that. But then you submit it, and there's a committee of farmers that then help us to see which ones are feasible in terms of research method, and do we actually have enough funds to fund everyone, that sort of thing. And then we create a really rigorous research protocol that farmers follow, and then hopefully farmers will do the work. I get to check in with folks over the season, then we get the data back, and we get to do all the statistical analysis and write a report. And hopefully then that information can be given to the farmers, and they can spread that information as needed. But our time has come to an end. So if we have questions.
Questions. Yeah, would you like maybe a couple minutes of questions? Let's take a break for those who aren't sticking to the tasting. We'll move on to the
I know, Joel's facilitating.
Yeah, my question's a little bit probably offensive. Let's start that way. Which is, what's there's a lot of work of building in, needs that farmers have for these carrots, and obviously all kinds of protocols for testing, tasting, and ensuring that they're ultimately winding up with markets. We have certain forms of science that allow us to do that through genetic modification. I know that organic farmers are reticent. Is there a place for genetic modification in this question of, this is probably a big debate, but stripping away the politics and capital involved in genetic modification? Is there a role for that kind of science on this?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, let's see. Like, obviously, stripping away the politics and power dynamics is slightly artificial because they're there.
Right.
But one of my friends at the University of Wisconsin from my lab is working on the first gene-edited carrot, which would, she's editing it to make a haploid inducer. So what that means is any plant, any diploid plant, crossed with a haploid inducer would come back as a haploid that could then be doubled and make an instant inbred, right? So this is available in some crops like corn. It makes the breeding process much more efficient. It makes a hybrid breeding process much more efficient because you can very quickly make inbred lines and then test them in hybrid crosses and speed up that process and potentially find new hybrids that would be well performing and profitable faster. They've toyed with wanted to release that to the open source seed initiative, which just to flesh that out a little bit is based on the idea of open source software. where the software is freely available, but then anything created from it must also be freely available. So when applied to seed, it makes this kind of public commons. That's what it's built to do, to create a public commons of germplasm, which is really important. And there are a lot of, especially organic plant breeders and smaller seed companies that participate very enthusiastically in creating this gene pool. However, when you're creating something at a university, like I did, even though I made something that was like inherently variable and all these things, there's reticence to, well, if you're creating something that could be very profitable for companies, or if companies are one of the stakeholders in your breeding project, if you release it under OSCE, that means anything they create has to then also be open for breeding. And some companies are open to that and some are not. Most of the bigger ones are not. They're interested in patenting or licensing what they produce and accruing royalties. So where did that take me? It is definitely a matter of debate. I would, let's see. I'd say a lot of the resistance to genetic modification at the molecular level, because like we're doing genetic modification. And like in a lot of cases, you know, when people do make a genetic modification, in order to pass all the regulations, they do much more investigation to ensure that that modification hasn't had off-target impacts and hasn't resulted in allergens. And we just like put two plants together in a cage and be like, do what you want, and we just assume that the outcome is fine, and generally it is. Like, you know, maybe whatever. So like we're creating much more unknown variability than just in facilitating sexual reproduction of plants, but we're also not introducing genes from other plants. So a lot of the resistance is because of that unnaturalness, that fact that it couldn't occur in nature, which then of course gets disrupted with gene editing, because any of those mutations could occur in nature. You know, they're point mutations.
I think
That
that
was a bit of a rant. Go ahead.
I think that because we generally work with folks who are following the organic standards, whether they're certified or not, that gene editing doesn't really come up in conversations. But I think that there are so many tools that we can use that are that are available to, say, Solveig, who's at a university, or to Marnie, like that are very helpful in the breeding process, that aren't like introducing a gene from another species. And I think that's where these linkages between folks who have those tools and farmers can be really helpful. Like, can we, like, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, like one way that breeders are also using things like marker-assisted selection and genomic prediction to use genomic information to either select parents or select among progeny, or say, I guess the capsaicin trait that Michael Mazurek, the pepper breeder, has used. Like, he developed a not hot habanero because the capsaicin gene is a single gene mutation. So he can like make a cross and then screen out all the ones that are hot, you know, just by taking a sample of the leaf, and then not have to grow them out in the field and spend all that time maintaining the plants. So and then genomic prediction is just a step farther than that, using information on these more complex traits like yield or climatic adaptation. So those strategies are being used, and those aren't genetically modifying anything. They're just using information about the genome to select plants that you want to use as parents.
One of the folks in that big slide of pictures, she's doing a like a squash breeding project. And she's doing the same thing where she's collecting leaves of the plants while they're still, you know, in their little trays in the greenhouse, sending them off to be, you know, say this one has resistance. Gene selected, to basically say, don't plant these ones out. They definitely don't have any resistance to powdery mildew, whereas these ones do. Plant them out, see if they meet your other criteria.
Yes.
I jump in. I want to get this question in. Like, I thought I'm curious, Sylvain, your thoughts after hearing Mark's talk about urban environment and trying to move and what was, from your experience, what's a target trait for urban agriculture?
For any specific crop.
Let's do a leap.
Okay.
I'm just curious if you feel like when you're thinking about urban environments versus traits for rural conditions, urban markets, you might have input in thinking about what's going on in environmentally and urban environments. What should we be looking for?
I mean, off the top of my head, I'm thinking about growing in containers or like either raised beds or different kinds of containers on the streets or whatever. I'm thinking about those containers drying more quickly than a field would, and needing to mitigate that. I mean, by having some kind of effective irrigation system, and also breeding for plants that can tolerate fluctuation in moisture that will inevitably occur from like very heavy rainfall that you can't prevent touching the plant or getting too dry for any number of reasons. So that
something that comes up for me is because the fava bean question, the whole project came up because they wanted to grow fava. Micheline wanted to grow. Was it Abeling? Micheline and Abeling was the one who suggested it originally, but yeah, it's at TMU and also then to rural farms as well. But the question that Micheline had was, can I grow favas, which are wanted by the chef, in an environment that is so hot in the spring because of all the concrete around me? Yeah. So I don't know. That's a trait that came to mind.
Yeah. Right. And whether it's very like more exposed to wind. Yeah. Or so I was just in Alberta for a field day, which was like the opposite of urban growing, like vast fields, but very windy. And I went to 2 different growers' farms, and one, didn't have protection, and the other had grown these clover walkways between her beds of radicchio, very close up to the plant, and it was great for all sorts of soil conserving reasons and soil feeding reasons, but it also gave a modicum of wind protection because of the flips across. And so like it just depends on what like urban microenvironment you're thinking about, depth of soil and whether it's
working with organic farmers to learn to anticipate climate change. City or in some ways, it's some of those axes of concern, but also opportunity on the brain.
Yeah.
Well. So, what do you think about rates of growth and steadiness?
Yeah, and you also have a lot more control over your growing environment. You get to really choose the soil. You get to choose the container, the drainage system, the irrigation system. So yeah, Beatrice.
To add to that question, I know that when you look at urban ag as a productive aspect for the system, and being able to grow a lot of food. I know that often we look at the complexity of the plant versus the yield.
Right.
And I know that there is some video like Unity when you look at it, they're like, this one are really compact paper plants, and that's really good for consumer growing. And I think that's another aspect because space is so limited. But you still wanna. I mean, that's when I do this kind of things like it's great to have Roma tomatoes, but how many plants of Roma tomatoes do I need to do a tomato crop versus one cherry tomato? Right. I think this this ratio of the complexity with yield, I think is also one of the things.
Yeah.
Things to consider.
And as a farmer, just the rule of thumb is don't grow something unless you know when you're going to sell it. And so if that's like talking to chefs, and maybe it's not just a cherry tomato, maybe it's a striped cherry tomato that has amazing flavor, blah, blah, blah. So you get the value, with the sustained economic if you're going to do it for
That's very much like transportation. Expanding transportation.
Yeah.
Go right from growth to
Yeah. Right. the shippability necessarily. Okay.
Oh my God, guys, so should we write a paper on this?
Great.
Anyway, I'm conscious of time. I know some people have to leave, so do you want to ask me a question?
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, that example reminded me of shippability. Was like we harvested the carrots yesterday, so like they didn't need to be like stored for very long.
I mean, that's
overnight.
there is examples of actually a grocery store in Montreal, the IGA was actually going right from the rooftop. So you've got this app to just go and 15 minutes sit down into your basket.
Wow.
Yeah, and this is happening. So, I mean, probably one location, but yeah, but that was on the rooftop farm also the same way, where they've got like 5 locations in Montreal, and then you just get boxes right from, as well.
Should I give a quick overview of what's going to happen with the carrots, what we have attention, and then like
Put them out while you're doing that.
Yeah, that'd
Like
be great.
a 1-minute overview.
Yes, exactly. So this presents an amazing opportunity to try 5 varieties of carrots grown both here at the UTSC farm and where I came from, it's the UBC farm. So my carrots were shipped in my suitcase. They were also picked last week, so you can take that into account. Well, so to collect information on Seedlink, which is the app, you'll see a QR code on each of the tables, right? So you take out your phone. If you wish to contribute data, if you don't want to, you can also just use carrots. You're going to bring up the survey on your phone. You can enter your email. If you do, you'll get the results mailed to you. You can also participate anonymously. Bring up the survey, take a plate, then take one of each cup, which are labeled with codes. The survey will direct you to the varieties by code in a random order. So just make sure the code on the top of your phone matches the cup you're eating from. And then it'll ask you about sweetness, texture, appearance, and overall liking. And then at the end, would you grow it again or not? Meaning, would you eat it again? Yeah. Uh-huh.
Are they the same varieties that are grown?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So we're tasting the place.
Yes.
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 You're tasting place plus time after harvest. I checked the bag, so it was a cooler environment than if it had been in the whatever bag had been up above me, but still. The which varieties are which are over there, so don't look until you want to know. Yeah, that's what we got. And Beatrice has some beverages here on the end. And I guess it'll take a moment to set up.
And you brought some recipes from a chef, and there's a few other things people can take.
Yes. We had a really fun tasting with a UBC chef last week. We left a pickle or a quick pickle recipe, and then a maple glazed carrot.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks for bringing us in.